we don't want to lose too much time. So I will say a very big welcome to everybody joining in today. Thank you all for coming by and having this very interesting talk from our side, from Magid and my side. First of all, just for you to know, we will have a chat function and a Q&A function. Please use the Q&A function for questions. We will not use any. We will not look up the whole chat for questions because it's just too hard to follow that. So please put any questions that you might have in the Q&A slot. And then we also, as you already saw, we have some polls that we're starting right now. We will send them out throughout the whole event, and basically you can answer them. It would be very interesting to see your points and what you do for a living, where you're living. We already see 2/3 are coming from the EU, 1/3 of the UK. So basically the UK is overrepresented if we look at it this way. So please enjoy your time here. Use all the functions that you have. If you want to follow the polls, if you want to chat with each other, please do so. Feel free. We'll try to follow it as well and write something in there as well. We want to have a lovely evening tonight, and talk about a very important issue. And the first point that we want to start off with, I want to introduce you to my co-host. I'm very happy to have him once back again with us. Magid, thank you so much for coming by. I'm happy to see you again. It was lovely to prepare this with you and to have this evening with you. And for all of you who might not know Magid, he started out by studying aquatic zoology. So basically he can tell you whether the British fish are really happy that they're British now. But then he became an activist, then he became the Lord Mayor of Sheffield. Then he became the Member of Parliament for the British Greens, or for the English Greens. And he became a colleague of mine, which was great to have him. We worked together in the Cult Committee, in the Culture and Education Committee. And in that committee, he was the shadow rapporteur for the Creative Europe file, very important file that you probably all have heard of. And he really negotiated everything there until Brexit hit, and we were all very sad to let go of our friends that we just made from Britain. And I took over this file from him, Creative Europe here, and finished in it. It wasn't much left to do because you did such a great work beforehand. But it was really a pity to see you go. And we already said we always have a place open for you, and we're expecting you to come back as soon as possible. So thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Niklas. And I guess to answer your question whether British fish are more happy, honestly, I don't think British fish are I think fish in general just don't even recognize borders, and I think they're just happy to be anywhere, honestly. But honestly, thank you very much for that very warm introduction. And Niklas, for those that don't know, is Niklas NIENASS. I had trouble pronouncing his surname when I first got to know him, but he sits on the Development Committee as well as the Culture and Education Committee at the European Parliament. And honestly, I know there's loads of MEPs that sit in the European Parliament, but in my opinion, and I guess in a lot of people's opinion in the European Parliament, the one MEP that really is the main champion for arts and culture and the value that it has in all our lives across Europe is Niklas. So thank you for all the hard work you're doing. And also for those that don't know, Niklas is a classically trained pianist. So he is an artist, and he also kind of looks out for all the artists and the creative and cultures all across Europe. So thank you very much and for that. So I guess welcome everybody. And I know we're going to be getting into a lot of discussion, so feel free, as Niklas said, to put comments in the comment box and ask questions. So of course, there's been many conversations regarding transport, pharmaceuticals, and fisheries, and how that's going to impact both sides after Brexit. But I guess what we're really discussing is the arts and culture. So we've got a wonderful guests that are joining us today from both the UK and EU as well. So we'll get to know them a bit, and I'll start off with Anita DEBAERE. She's a director of Pearle and Live Performances Europe. and is based in Belgium. And welcome, Anita. Just a quick question. You can just introduce yourself, what Pearle is for those that might not know what Pearle is, and what the organization is and what your role is in that.
Yeah, thank you, Magid, and thank you, Niklas, for the invitation. And hello, good evening, everybody from wherever you are in Europe and the UK, of course. I'm really honored to be here. Pearle is I'm the director of Pearle, which is called Live Performance Europe. And we are a very broad network of over 10,000 organizations represented in the live performance sector. So it's music, it's performing arts, it's circus, it's suppliers to performing arts. And our sector employs, according to Eurostat, about 1.2 million people, which was still including the UK. But we think it's more because with data you never know, and also because of strange ways of working. So we estimate that that figure is below what actually the number of people are working in the sector. So very happy to be here with Pearle. Some of you might know our brochures on mobility, on visas, on social security, etc., which we have issued past years. And Pearle has been asked on many expert groups and giving advice in relation to questions to mobility. So I suppose that's why I'm here, and I hope I can answer some of your questions at least. Hello.
Definitely, thank you. And just a quick question, Anita, in terms of course, you know, when it comes to live performances, there's going to be a lot of issues regarding the costs, the extra paperwork, and it's going to massively disrupt the mobility aspect of it. So from, I guess, from what you know now, I guess now that we know we've left, there's been an agreement made between the EU and the UK. What would you say is the main, should we say the main three, or some of the main ways that it's going to impact live performers from both sides, and the UK and the EU?
Yeah, I think, well, what is of course important to go back what the trade agreement is about and what it covers and doesn't cover. And yeah, we know that UK is no longer part of the customs union. It's no longer part of the single market. It has its own trade policy, and in the agreement there's also no chapter on mobility of persons. And I think that has the biggest consequence for us, that we are really hampered by the fact that there's nothing there that facilitates, and the biggest workload will be around those aspects of mobility. We will probably come back to that later in terms of what's the issue, the questions and the big debates that have happened also in the British press about work visas. So we can talk about that later, but there are other aspects as well, which will of course also influence, be it on customs, where you have to declare your goods, or whether you can get an exemption, be it on road haulage, which is also an issue, especially for the music sector when they travel with big lorries and lots of material. So I think those are the three ones that are outstanding. But then there are little ones for musicians traveling with musical instruments which contain protected species. They will need to get their CITES certificate, the musical instrument certificate. So it's a kind of piling up of different things which will make it, of course, quite difficult, and lots of different tiny little things that will have to be checked and double checked, and that are still posing quite a lot of questions indeed. Yeah.
Thank you. And over to you, Niklas.
Yes, thanks. Let me introduce you to Julia Frank, who actually knows of first-hand experience what it means to bring musicians on the road, basically, and to bring them into different countries, or to manage all of that. She is the senior executive manager for touring at Visit Promotions, based in Germany in Frankfurt am Main. And Julia, now it's hard to switch from German pronunciation in English, but we'll probably in the end stick with the English one. So please tell us, give us a little bit of an insight. What does your day-to-day job look like? What does it mean to organize all this touring and all these promotions, etc.?
First of all, thank you for the invite, Niklas and Magid. Wizard Promotions is one of the big German concert promoters, and we book mostly international acts in Germany. A lot of the UK acts include Jamie Cullum, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Texas, and we basically bring them on tour in Germany. So I'm handling the booking, but I'm also one of our regular tour and production managers. I go out on tour with the bands. I handle a lot of the production related issues, sound and light equipment, rental, trucking, etc. So the travel situation, I agree with Anita, is a big issue, and also the tracking of the equipment. My understanding is that currently the trucks coming from UK can only do 3 stops, and usually a tour is at least 20-30 stops in Europe. So that will be an issue.
You also have experience, because in the background you have a poster of KISS, and they are from the US, obviously. So you have some experience also in bringing people from outside of the EU and planning tours for them, or and booking them, etc. So can you compare that a little bit to what do you know from external EU musicians? And what is your experience from so far from the UK, and what out of this do you expect to happen in the future? How would that change or increase the burdens for your profession?
Well, in general, all bands deal with the same issues. I mean, it's not EU related, but in general, if you travel the world, there's certain countries where you need work visas, and you have to pay the shipping and customs and stuff. So it's not new to them. I think the difference is going to be that there will be different regulations for every country. Before it was just one deal for all the Schengen countries, and now I think Spain and Denmark and Italy, you're required to have work permits, and that will be difficult.
Okay, one last short question. Do you think, like, what's interesting for people who are visiting is obviously also a question of pricing. So do you think they will increase the price, that if you have additional burdens, bureaucratic, etc., they will increase the price, or will that be compensated otherwise?
Almost definitely. If you take KISS, for example, they would usually start either in mainland Europe or UK. If they start in the UK, we might now run into a situation where they need an extra 2 days to travel to Europe. So 2 days extra trucking, personnel costs, hotels. With a band like that with 20 vehicles, it can easily run up to 100,000 euros. And that will have to be split either across the other shows, or the band has to deal with it.
All right, I think that's already a very good insight here. So I give it back to Magid, please.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And just want to next introduce Tom KIEHL, and who's Deputy CEO and Director of Public Affairs at UK Music, based in London, the UK. And Tom's got experience working with the government and parliamentarians in the UK and afar. So Tom, if you can just briefly explain to people what UK Music is and what your role within that is, and the kind of different groups that you represent.
Sure, thank you, Magid, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the illustrious audience who have spending this evening listening to this very important discussion. Some very important names from European public affairs and lobbying on and from MEPs, ex and former and current on there. So it's great to be with you this evening. In terms of for those of you who know or don't know, UK Music is an umbrella organisation for the commercial music industry in the UK. We're effectively quite a globally unique organisation in that we bring together the creator organisations, the record company organisations, the music publishers, the collecting societies, and the live sector. And very few organisations can really claim to do that. And we've been in existence for over 12 years now, and primarily our main work is representation with MPs and government officials and ministers in London, and trying to get progress and trying to ensure that the music industry can be strong and succeed and grow in the years ahead. And the music industry is worth 5.8 billion to the economy. It employs 200,000 people in the UK and generates exports of effectively around about 3 billion. So it's a significant driver of growth and creativity within the sector. We have been campaigning for a number of years since the EU referendum to ensure that music didn't get forgotten or missed out of any kind of future trade agreement. There are elements of the agreement where there has been deals around copyright protection, which is obviously incredibly important for our sector. But as both Julia and Anita have highlighted, there's a significant gap within the existing deal regarding mobility and the arrangements around that. That said, I think the situation of having a deal is something that is important and shouldn't be lost sight of. It's certainly better than a kind of no deal outcome, which potentially was obviously very much on the cards up until the very last minute, really. But the important thing now is that we work together with government and partners across Europe in order to get what we need to reciprocally work as a sector.
Yeah, and I guess as you know, like the music sector in itself is so wide, consisting of publishing, touring, distribution, all of that. Which, in your opinion, sector is the one you feel as if like is going to be mostly affected by Brexit the most? And also, I guess as an umbrella organisation, what has the feeling and morale been from those member organisations that you represent?
Sure. In terms of like the most affected, I mean, I think what we've highlighted already, I think the live touring aspect is going to be incredibly a big change. And what we're doing at the moment as well is because of COVID, and there is very little touring going on. What we're having at the moment is quite a theoretical argument, I think, or discussion about what this may mean in practice. So we've weirdly got a kind of transition period to kind of get some of these issues right. So actually, when we do start operating again and touring more widely, so there's an opportunity there. But obviously, it's in the worst circumstances imaginable that we're kind of doing that. But I think certainly the live touring aspect is where the most significant changes will happen. That said, on things like copyright, I mean, copyright gave a big high level of protection for the music industry, having the kind of backbone of the European framework that it was falling upon. Without those EU protections, that could all change now potentially, and essentially, as we have autonomy over the way our legislative framework works, that could get altered, and we could differ from the way that Europe approaches things. And so that I think again that's something where we is maybe a more longer term issue, but I think the immediate challenge is there. Sorry, can you remind me of your second question?
In terms of the member organisations that represent, being an umbrella organisation,
the morale,
like what's their their sentiments have been?
Sure. I mean, I think since the deal, so there was a mild relief the fact that we have a deal in place, but then there's the problem of completely unpicking it now. And I think what we're doing is learning lots of things all the time. I think things since the beginning of the year, when we have now the framework agreement, the cooperation agreement is now existing, we are really generally learning things all the time. So there's legitimate concern, I think, about how things are going to map out and there's been a big pushback. 200,000 people signed a big petition that's leading to a parliamentary debate in the UK Parliament next Monday, highlighting the issues around touring in particular. The government in the UK has been on the back foot as well in terms of justifying the approach it has taken in the negotiations. There has been a bit of a blame game going on between the EU and the UK. The government in the UK has brought together, is bringing together a task force to bring together all those organisations who do have concerns about permits and touring, and that is definitely a positive step. But there is generally an anxiety about how this is all going to map out in the future.
And one final quick question. And in terms of like, where does artists, like in terms of music artists, and of course you've got the Musics Union and in the UK, how's their voice being represented in those conversations to make sure that the actual musician artist voice are also being heard and represented at those meetings?
Sure. Well, they're both directly and indirectly, I would say. The Musicians Union as an organisation is in a lot of these meetings, and with the government, the round table that our Secretary of State Oliver Dowden held. The Musicians Union played a very strong role within that. UK Music as well represents creator organisations like the Featured Artists Coalition, the Musicians Union, the Ivors Academy, which represents songwriters. So very much within, either indirectly through UK Music or directly with their own representations. There's lots of very powerful advocates out there, and that voice is getting heard.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. Over to you, Nicholas.
Yeah, I'll join in there, and actually one sentence that you said, Tom, very relating to our situation at the moment, really unpacking the whole deal at the moment. We are really struggling also from the European Parliament to really look at all the pages that there are and all the different aspects, and we don't have the actual time to have a appropriate scrutiny for it. And I think that is really devastating in terms of the question, what is needed for democracy as a control, and also to ask all the people who are affected to get their input and to double check it. But anyway, let's go to the next guest that we have tonight, which is Nick McDowell, who is the director of the International Arts Council in England, based in London in the UK. Very welcome to you. Good to have you here today. Please give us a first insight and tell us, what do you do, or basically what does the Arts Council do, especially the international part of it? What does that mean?
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Magid. Thanks, fellow panelists and audience. It's a privilege to be here. So yeah, I work at Arts Council England, where I'm the international director. It's an organization that's been running since 1946, and its role is to invest in, develop, and advocate for the arts in England. So it's a pretty wide spectrum, music, of course, but dance, theatre, visual arts, museums and libraries, festivals, multi-art centres, the whole thing. So a lot of our money is put into regularly funded organisations, a portfolio of 800 organisations of different sizes and scales all the way across the art forms. And the rest of the money is giving out on project funds focused on important aspects like developing places, particularly of low engagement, Black Lives Matter, diversity, a big focus is for us at the moment, as you might expect. And on the international side, it was interesting. I started doing my job about 7 years ago, and nobody knew exactly how much international activity was going on in the organizations that we invest in. So we did the research, and we found that actually 2/3 of these 800 organizations, 2/3, are involved in international activity to some extent. And of them, 60% of the work that they do is with partners in Europe, co-creation, collaboration, touring in and out, artists coming backwards and forward. Talking of artists, by the way, somebody, was it Magid, talked about fish not knowing borders. I don't think artists know borders either, which is one of the challenges that we have at the moment. So my role at Arts Council England is to encourage and enhance relationships between artists transnationally. And our watchwords are exchange, partnership, and growth. Exchange, obviously, reciprocity, mutuality, we have to work together. Collaboration changes the way in which artists think about their practice, transforms it. Partnership, we can't do it on our own. I have a very small team. So we work with partners across Europe and across the world and at home. So the British Council, the Goethe Institute, the Institut Français, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those partnerships are crucial to us. Growth, because you can't have successful international activity unless you have some sort of economic engine behind it. You know, the business models of a lot of the English organizations are dependent on their relationships with Europe, particularly our orchestras and dance organizations. And I know it's true vice versa. So that's just a little bit of the flavor of the work we do at Arts Council England with a focus on international and Europe.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have one additional question here. And I want to keep it a little bit short because we will have the political dimension of it a little bit later, because you know that we have the Creative Europe program, very important program that Magid and I both worked on as shadows for the Green Party, for the Green Group, and now we know finally that the UK will not participate in the Creative Europe program, even though it is not strictly limited to EU members. It is, there's a lot of other non-EU members who participate in it, and it was possible for the UK to participate in. They opted out and they didn't want to it. We had previously already talked a little bit about the trend to, which is in the UK, to a little bit say, okay, we don't want to have anything to do with Europe. I want to save that discussion for later. So just for you and for your organizations, what does it very concretely mean to be not in the Creative Europe program in cases of funding and cooperation?
So it's a matter of personal sadness to me and to pretty much everybody else in the arts sector in England that we aren't part of Creative Europe. But I'm not going to dispute the political dimensions of this. It's not appropriate. I will say that there is a financial loss. But the financial loss is significant, 4 or 5 million euros a year into English organizations, but that's nothing compared with the networking and partnerships that are enabled by the multinational, multilateral structure of Creative Europe are really important and a significant loss. And I know that Marie-Pearle is on the call. There are other networks like On the Move and IETM and other networks that we will be working with to try and make sure that our artists are connected in Europe, because we feel European, we feel profoundly connected, but Creative Europe is a loss for us.
Magid, do you take over?
Thank you very much. And back to you, Anita. And what would you say in terms of, I guess, the most important obstacles to European live performances in general? Like, I'm assuming, like, would that be taxations, visa issues? What would you say is the #1 key and main obstacle facing live performers?
Thank you. Well, we thought we will make a list for our members, and we came to 10 points, which is always nice to have 10 points. But actually the one that stands out and that is the biggest obstacle is actually the mobility, in terms of what do you need? Will you need a visa? Will you need a work permit? There's a lot of uncertainties, and I must say it was until last week when we got clarification from the Commission that we actually understood where exactly is the difficulty. And that's why I said in my introduction as well, it's very important to remember that the trade agreement has not the chapter on mobility, which is common to the other trade agreements. So wherever you look at the EU having trade agreements with whatever party in the world, usually it has a chapter on mobility. And in those chapters on mobility, you get kind of visa facilitation. Now that chapter is not there, so you get an extra complication. The complication is the following, that you might need to get a visa. Well, we're talking about short term, because that's the most common kind of mobility that happens. You come for a gig, you come for a couple of performances. So we're talking about short term. And we talk about UK nationals, so I'm not going to talk about now. Yeah. But the thing is that when they will come to Europe now, they will have to check with the consulates in London or whatever of the respective country whether they will put a visa condition. And in addition, they will also have to check in the member state whether they will need a work permit. Now, this double act makes it very difficult. And that is something that was not clear at all to us, but that now has been clarified. And that I think is a matter of now having to deal with 27 regimes. It's what Julia was saying as well. It's no longer like you deal with just one situation because you were part of the free movement of mobility and persons. It's having to deal with 27 different situations, and that is always going to be the difficult thing. It's on the other hand, for European artists going to the UK, it's of course only one country where we have to deal with also the question of, well, under what conditions can we come in, under the permitted stay or under the tier 5? So what avenues do you take there? But it's only one country, and it's much more a challenge for the British, unfortunately. Yes.
Definitely. Thank you. And Julia, just a quick question, I guess, in terms of like even from a production point of view and like from a promoter's point of view, and I know at the moment there's not been much activity due to the global pandemic, but in terms of like within your role, is there much conversation happening at the moment with British counterparts preparing for when we leave and we actually, and people being vaccinated and COVID's not a thing, of how to actually work together and move things forward? Because of course it only not just, I guess, touring, but also affects music festivals, which are as international as it can get as well. So is there much conversations happening at the moment with British counterparts in terms of like preparing a way forward and just, I guess, trying to tackle the issues together?
Not so much at the moment, because like Tom says, that's maybe the one good thing about the pandemic. We still have time to get this right. We are talking among friends, but not actually preparing. But I'm most worried about the development acts, because the first European tour is usually their first step outside of their UK market and winning new fans, finding their way through Europe. And they're going to miss out on that cultural experience, and because for a lot of our developed acts, it's just a matter of money, which is also, of course, an obstacle, but they usually have their visa agencies they're dealing with. The smaller bands do not have that, and they might actually not be able to go on tour and deal with it. And the other issue is the technicians in freelance backline techs or sound and light techs working for UK companies. They usually come over 3-4 times a year with different bands. And if there's countries over here that will only allow a 90-day work permit within 12 months, that obviously will be an issue. They cannot come on 3-4 different tours.
Brilliant. No, thank you. And Tom, I guess in terms of numbers, and what will Brexit mean in terms of like the loss of income into the British economy and jobs? And if you can just shed some light in terms of figures and stuff like that, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. I think unfortunately, I don't think if I could give you a really solid answer, because I think it's obviously quite early to tell really. And as I said, obviously the dust is still settling on the deal itself. I mean, in terms, what we do know, we have run polls like since the referendum and stuff, and what we have, again, what sort of highlighting that kind of feeling in the community itself is very few people felt there would be positive opportunities for them within Brexit. Conversely, it was probably around about 50% were in the sort of don't know category, or maybe to sort of see how it is. I mean, it will be interesting if we kind of like do those kind of sort of tests again. And I guess the real test, I think, as to whether Brexit is a success or a failure for the UK will be on that ability to whether it is true that we will be able to carve out an alternative trade policy in the rest of the world, really, which whether that does generate a return on things for creative industries and music in particular. And I think that will be the immeasurably the European market is our biggest market in many ways, but I think it is hard to give a finite sort of figure on it.
Of course, thank you. And Nick, and I guess one of the sad realities of Brexit is that a lot of UK artists and in general won't be able to actually get access to certain funding and stuff. So do you have much hopes, or do you know if the UK is like providing any sort of funding and alternative to things like Creative Europe? I know there was mention of the Alan Turing program to replace the Erasmus Plus program. So what are your hopes and in terms of like the government actually providing some additional funding, but I guess more so with a European dimension.
Yeah, well, it's clear from where I sit that there won't be a like-for-like replacement for Creative Europe. Indeed, there couldn't be, because it's a multilateral program, and that's not possible from where the UK sits now. But there is talk of and dialogue about a kind of international touring fund, which would cover both Europe and the wider world. It's very much in discussion. It may or may not happen. And we have to remember right now that the UK government, like all governments, is under tremendous pressure just to deal with the domestic fallout from COVID. And just to keep a balance here, I want to kind of remind myself that UK government spent 1.57 billion keeping the cultural infrastructure in the UK going. And that's a significant thing. And it may be that once we're a little way out of the COVID woods, the chances of securing funding for transnational activity will improve.
Great, no, thank you, Nick. And over to you, Niklas.
Yeah, thank you. I want to start with the poll that was just finished, and where you all answered, and basically half of the people think that, well, even more, 80%, 86% think that this will have a tremendous impact on the, or at least some impact on the diversity, if the UK loses the access. Only what is it, 14% don't think so. So that's an interesting figure, and we can go in the similar direction right now, because now we want to see a little bit, we got a little bit of stock taking from your side. What's interesting, obviously, for us, being a lot of politicians or activists, or everybody's working in this field around, and the big question is, what can we do, and what can we try to do better, and what do we expect also to happen there? And one thing that I want to pick up from Nick here is, when we, and also was mentioned in the chat concerning the European Bauhaus initiative, for example, where we try to use this Green Deal mechanism that we want to use to come out of the pandemic and to have a recovery that also already orients into the future and to build up a new economy. And with the new Bauhaus initiative, we would align that a little bit, or at least that would be my hope for the cultural sector in general, that if we have a pandemic recovery, then also already do it in the spirit of tackling additional threats that are there. And for the UK, I think there would be ideally to get more into internationalization in there as well. But let's start and get around through here and see what you guys think. What do you expect from us, from the European Parliament, but also from the European Commission? What do you expect from the UK Parliament, and what can activists and our Green Party in Britain do to help you out? What can we all do to improve the situation, even though we're all not quite sure? I think that's the feeling at the moment, what will exactly happen because of COVID. But I think that some tendencies are already worrying everybody. So maybe, Anita, you can start. What do you expect from the European side? Maybe you can start with the European side, since you know it probably very good. And what do you expect from Commission and Parliament side?
Yeah, well, thank you. I think what we definitely want is to be able to keep the cooperation that has existed for years, that is there, that it is not lost. I mean, it's not because we kind of divorced that the contacts are not there, and that's definitely the feeling that exists very strongly in the culture sector. This is really like, okay, we will overcome the obstacles. We really want to continue to work together, and I think that will and that determination is there in the culture sector. Obviously, yeah, we have to deal and we have to be realistic. And I'll come back to my favorite topic on the mobility. I think what we would like to ask your support in is that we ask the member states to continue receiving UK artists just like also other third country nationals now, to have a kind of general approach by all the member states to provide exemptions for visas and work permits. I mean, they have that possibility. It's in their power. It's a member state decision, but nevertheless, if they can come to a kind of general approach, a kind of declaration that they are committed to that, I think we would be a big step already further. And then, okay, we can build on that step by step. We can't get a European rule out, but if at least every member state declares that they find it important, and I think this is also the role of our European organizations, is to say, look, we want this to happen. Our festivals need to have European UK artists there, etc. So it's also in the self-interest of the European organizations, and if we can make that happen and get them understand, like, yes, we need exemptions and facilitate that short term, it's in everybody's interest. I hope we could move forward. So yeah, that's very much my scope.
Anita, I want to. It's a very fair point that you mentioned there, and I want to play the ball a little bit into the direction, maybe to Tom, because what we did previously was already check with the Commission concerning the visa restriction. And you maybe all know, especially those from Britain, that there was a petition concerning the visa travel-free visa compromise. And there was the question for the government to please make this possible. And then the government replied and answered, we actually proposed this in the negotiations, and the European side didn't want it. So when I read that, we asked the Commission, and they said, well, no, they did not propose it. They only wanted that the UK artist can come to Europe, but that no European artist can come to the UK. So we at the moment don't know who's true, or what is true or what is not. Maybe Tom, you can go in there. Maybe you have heard something. You have talked to
Sure.
Tory members of the government and know something of this back and forth.
I mean, I think that it's quite entirely possible that maybe both are actually telling the truth. It's that they were both coming at it from different perspectives in terms of what they saw as mobility, and it just wasn't compatible. Brexit is fundamentally about ending free movement. That is effectively why the referendum was won. That was the big calling card. That said, they have worked with bodies such as UK Music and Musicians Union over the recent years in order to try to get something forward, and we've been in constructive negotiations with them. So we do, and similarly, it's entirely possible that the Commission proposed something too. So in some ways, I prefer not to get into a blame game, because I think it's impossible that it just was uncompatible, the two different approaches to how you can maybe address that situation. I think what the important thing is, though, that both sides effectively were proposing solutions. And I think that's maybe what we need to focus on now. Yes, we spent an awful lot of time trying to reach an agreement, and so the appetite for coming back to the table to renegotiate some kind of alternative or supplementary agreement may not be there in the short term. But the thing I think we need to hold our political masters in both the European Union and the UK too is that sense that they do want something to be in place to address that issue. And I think that's really what we should kind of take away from that. And I think, as has been spoken about, bilateral negotiations, those where there are very acute problems. We are on a data gathering evidence basis at the moment in UK Music. We're talking to our promoter contacts. We're talking to the embassies and consulates too, just to really get chapter and verse as to how they see, if UK musicians were touring Europe, how that would work in practice. I think if we get strong evidence from, say, a country where a particular intervention is needed, then that may require some kind of bilateral negotiation too. But it does seem to be, in spite of their failure to reach an agreement, there is still at least a recognition that this will be a potential problem and something where a solution is needed.
I think this recognition is actually there, and I think that from both sides, at least some parts, really want to deliver on this. So it's good to hear also that there might be a channel to focus it, and that we should come together. And I like the point that Anita made there. So really look into the future and see how we can cooperate in the future, and to improve the situation. Maybe we will have a chance. I know that we will try to focus in the EP on this. I know that the British Chamber is talking about this also, I think this week or next week. So it'd be interesting to also tune in there in the discussion about this very particular issue. Now I want to go to Julia. You're European, right? But for like, let me play the devil's advocate. Wouldn't it be the easiest to go for the fastest solution for you personally, maybe to go with like, okay, the German politicians and the German Minister of Foreign Affairs just goes to his colleague from the British side, and they make a vice versa visa free zone just for these two countries? Is that something that you'd prefer, or should there definitely be a European solution with all member states aligned?
No, it should definitely be a European solution. Otherwise, like I said earlier, and Anita stated as well, you're going to have 27 different agreements. It's not so much for our German bands touring in the UK. So it's I'm worried about the UK artists touring here, obviously, and that needs at least Schengen-wide agreement and more flexibility on the periods. 90 days within 12 months is not going to work. So there has to be some kind of flexibility for people who come over more than once a year.
What else do you expect? Oh, thank you very much, Ben. We have another poll here. Please look at the poll concerning obstacles. What do you expect to be the biggest obstacles? But maybe, Julia, you could also elaborate a little bit. What do you expect now from policymakers from both sides to improve the situation? Put aside a little bit the visa controlling. Maybe there could be maybe we can live with the visas if we get support and financial support to come up for that, or maybe you have some ideas in that direction.
Maybe some special agreement for development acts, for some kind of exchange program, or that the young upcoming bands can come and play to new markets, or at least some kind of funding for that. Exchange
program is a very, very good point. It was also mentioned several times already in the chat concerning Erasmus, of course. We will have another webinar especially for Erasmus next week, Magid and I. So if you're interested, also tune in there. But also it's a good point because we can now come over to Nick, because Nick, for you have the question concerning what could be alternatives for new ways to bring people together to maintain these connections, not just in the music sector. I mean, we all agree that they will be, especially touring and upcoming artists will be hit hard, but for the whole cultural sector, we already heard about this idea concerning internationalization of culture, and what can we do apart from everything that we spoke of, visa liberations, as well as maybe get the Brits back into the Creative Europe program, but maybe there's other parts that we could do.
I mean, I think that there are many people in the art sector here who would love to come back into Creative Europe. It's hard to imagine how that could be possible in that negotiations now happen with 27 countries separately. One of the things that we're embarking on is bilateral relationships, which have been there before, of course, but to try to deepen some of those relationships country by country between England and states in Europe. And alongside that, and in parallel, trying to work harder with some of the other networks which enable mobility and connection between artists across the continent. I mentioned On the Move before, and IETM, which is a theatre managers collective that works across Europe and the world. There are also clusters. One of the things that the UK countries have started doing in the last few months is working much more closely together, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And I think often when I've worked abroad, people have said, well, can we just work with the whole UK? And my answer, I've always wanted to say yes. And I hope we're moving a little bit closer to that in terms of the funding structures at home in England. And, you know, there are other clusters and structures within Europe that we hope we might work with. We've done some work, for example, with the Nordic countries. There's 9 countries on the northern edge of the continent. But we are open to ideas and we are desperate to stay connected. So please, anybody who wants to come forward with suggestions and proposals, I would love to hear them.
Right, thank you very much for this initial ideas, and thank you all for already bringing us really some ideas. I just want to give you the results of the last poll. The main issue most people see is visa issues, and I hope that we can solve that as quickly as possible. Tom, I count on you as well, as everyone here really, to really pressurize from both sides, and we can work on that. Other issues were public funding, as well as taxation, interesting, and also others. Maybe you can write in the chat if you have put others, then what you mean with that, what you personally feel is the biggest issues. Now for, I would give it to Magid, because you have one question again for the whole round here.
Yeah, definitely. Just kind of quick comment I just wanted to make, because I really read a interesting report that basically was looking at the correlation between the lack of arts and culture in a specific region and or country and the rise of xenophobic behavior and racism. So there definitely really is a connection between both of those, which would be faster. So I guess like not even just the music aspect, but also really the theatre aspect of it, which really plays a big part, because I'm sure we can all agree that art, more than anything, really engenders empathy, and it kind of is, therefore it's really difficult to be an empathetic person than to be xenophobic or racist, any of that sort of aspect. So it's something that we really, I guess, have to kind of protect. And I guess from a personal point of view, it's really sad or a shame to kind of see Britain, what feels like, in all honesty, having a really nationalist approach to when it kind of comes to arts and culture. So that's something we really, I guess, can't really lose the fight for. But I guess the question I really had was, arts and culture in general has always, I guess, come under criticism for being elite and not representing marginalized groups like working class people and people of color. And of course, now with less opportunities and with more costs because of Brexit, how do we make sure that marginalized groups aren't support? How do we make sure marginalized groups are supported and they're not just falling through the cracks of Brexit? So that's the question to everyone. So I'll start off with you, Anita, if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, well, I think by inviting them as much as possible, of course, and to make them part. I think what we see, at least in different member states, is already a kind of approach of ensuring a policy that ensures a much more broader integration of a reflection of society, and that becomes a condition also in culture policy making. It's not there yet, I must admit, at the level it should be, but at least that is already happening in culture policy making in different countries. And I think that's a very important trend to support, because indeed, I mean, it's true, the arts and culture have been looked upon as quite elitist. But at the same time, you also see a lot of grassroots initiatives happening, and they have to be recognized in culture policy making. And that is also the aspect that has often been missing a little bit. So it's kind of, you know, it works in two ways. Culture policy not paying attention, and then at the same time grassroots which stays and cannot move forward. So I think, yeah, it's a matter of trying to put that together. And I think the music sector is much stronger on that than, say, more the classical areas of theater, etc. Although dance is also much more. So it depends a bit on which niche market you look at. So I kind of constantly feel I'm contradicting myself, but I think, yes, it's very much about having people in culture policy who support that and let you move forward on that.
Thank you. And Julia?
I guess it's our responsibility really to make sure that we have diversity with supporting development acts from my perspective, supporting development acts, I will not be able to bring over as many bands as before, and I will have to be more selective, and I just need to keep an eye on the right amount of diversity, female acts, colored acts, all kinds of talent. And I think that's the main issue, because we might lose some very talented musicians that just don't have the financial funding. And
that's the worry.
Those we as bookers have to keep an eye out for.
Yeah. Tom?
That's a brilliant question, Magid. I mean, from our perspective, I think bringing it back to COVID again, I think had we not had the pandemic, I think now in the UK, we'd be having a very big existential debate about what we are as a country and where our priorities are. And I think certainly from a party line UK music perspective, but I do think it is shared with lots of people. It's just the sheer creativity and ingenuity within our nation that is actually a big unifier. And I think what we need to do is talk more strongly, more powerfully about that, I think, to government than we have been doing, because we do have a huge asset in the creativity, and again, whether it's Brexit, whether it's COVID or other things, the music industry and the creative industry, it's actually in periods of strife and actual great difficulty where actually you get brilliant art, brilliant literature, brilliant music comes out of that, and it almost like we catalogue like the times that we live through and the difficulties that we have through that. So I think it's really about ensuring that we are maintained to be a creative nation in the way that we can and be, but we need the right framework to support that, and which is why imperative that the kind of solutions that we're looking for on Brexit and then the further support that we need on COVID is put in place, because we won't be able to get to that point without that.
Yeah, brilliant. And finally, Nick.
Yeah, it's a really important question. And, you know, the diversity across all the protected characteristics of the kind of art scene in the UK, I think, is one of its absolute greatest strengths. And the Arts Council has been working to try to make sure that the demographic of the country is more accurately represented in the funding that we give out for a number of years now. We aren't there yet. I'm not claiming that we are. One thing that's interesting is that when we do international funding projects, the level of culturally diverse inclusion in terms of ethnicity increases quite dramatically. So we want to keep on doing international projects and doing international funding for many reasons, not least because it seems to draw more people from more ethnic backgrounds into the game, into the mix.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. And back to you, Niklas.
Yeah, thank you, Magid. Thank you all for very, very precise, very good answers. And actually, I want to point your attention to the poll that we just did concerning the question of the unity within the UK. And there was overwhelming, like 72, yeah, there we go, 70% that say they fear that Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales will push to go their own ways. And I think that's a point where Tom's point was really is important to take care of, that that culture could unify that again, or really ask the question, what is the UK of a country now? Where do you stand? What is happening now in the future, and where do you want to go? And I think that's really a missed question at the moment. Good point there. I want to open up some questions that we have received over the Q&A. Let me just see, because we have some question for our experts right here. And the first question would be a little bit in this direction. What are the cultural consequences for Northern Ireland? What do you expect Northern Ireland, who will be probably most hit by the Brexit? Do you think that there will be changes in the cultural sphere and the cultural out view of that? Maybe Nick, you can respond to that. By the way, this question from John Fallon from ICMP.
Yeah, I won't claim to any expertise in this area. What I do know, anecdotally, is that the kind of sea border, no, it's not a sea border, between the island of England and Northern Ireland is creating complications for the movement of all goods of all sorts. As I mentioned earlier, we at Arts Council England and with Creative Scotland, Wales and the Arts Council in Northern Ireland are trying to work much more closely together these days. So we hope that in doing so, we will be greater than the sum of our parts, but inevitably Northern Ireland is going to have some difficulties over the coming months in cultural movement in and out.
All right, thank you. Anybody else who has a view on this? Maybe I think it's a question maybe for Magid and Tom, as you are more fringe with the British question here.
I think from my perspective, I think what we've had a situation with Northern Ireland, obviously it's the power sharing arrangement that does exist in Northern Ireland has had a lot of difficulties in recent years, and the beginning of last year that things had got back together again, and in terms of the executive and the Northern Ireland administration that works there. So if it feels that obviously it's a much more tightly controlled type of devolution that exists in Northern Ireland, and doesn't say Scotland and Wales, and I think it's quite hard to make parallels. But I do agree with Nick. I think that there's the way that many ways Northern Ireland is isolated in certain aspects of the agreement, I think is a great challenge, and there are issues to do with, say, carnets, to do with to do with whether permissions for permitted paid engagements, etc., whether if you've got an Irish passport, whether you can go through Northern Ireland, etc. These are still a lot of the kind of live questions that we're still grappling with, and I think Northern Ireland is in a very unique position in that agreement, and it really is hard. That is one of those kind of issues where we are kind of learning things all the time about how that manifests in reality.
Okay, Magid, you want to add something on that, or you're muted?
Sorry, I'm just cautious of time, so we'll just head to the next question.
All right.
That I had. And so I guess, of course, with Creative Europe funding no longer available, no longer an option, shall we say, for UK mechanism, how do you think we can fund cooperations on projects with European partners working specifically in arts and culture? So I guess even for the people who actually joined in and who are actually in the audience, if anyone's got any projects or any funding for corporations and projects, both UK and Europe, if you please share that, that'd be great. But I guess from the panelists, how do you think we can actually fund corporations and projects that is not Creative Europe? And is there any other option?
Well, may I come in here, Magid? Just a footnote here. I mean, an awful lot of the funding that the Arts Council gives out regularly to organisations in England is specifically for international activity, and much of that international activity is in Europe. It's kind of written into the funding agreements that we make. A lot of partnership and collaboration projects and touring projects and residency exchanges and so on and so forth. So quite a lot is in there already. The reality is that it's going to be more expensive when you factor in the work permits, the carnets, the challenges with cabotage, uncertainties about health insurance and so on and so forth. But what struck me, we have a group of 40 or 50 organizations that work right across the arts, and many of them work in Europe. They're internationally focused. And when we had this group, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, they came together and they weren't saying, oh my God, what a disaster. They were saying, okay, we worked out how we can get people from this country to that country. We've worked out how much it's going to cost. We're not quite sure how we're going to tweak the business model, but it was all forward thinking and positive. It was like, okay, this is really difficult, but we're going to work our way around it, because as we know, artists have extraordinary energy and innovative qualities, and they find their way around these problems. So more money is going to be needed, but I think that the entrepreneurial nature of artists and producers and managers will probably prevail as long as people can cross borders once COVID relents.
Actually, I want to turn that question around a little bit for Julia and Anita. Do you think we need an extra funding for artists coming into the EU from outside, from third countries that are not included so far, which would then be also the UK, but also obviously other countries? I think we shouldn't make a lex specialis just for the UK, but to have something like that, is that sensible for the diversity of culture in Europe?
I go first, Julia, or do you want to go first? It's a tricky question, isn't it? Well, there exists some possibilities. I'm not an expert, I'm sorry, on the on the funding side, but I think there are sometimes possibilities, not immediately. Or you would be talking about an extension of Creative Europe to more countries than the ones that are now in the Creative Europe, which is already pretty much. I mean, it's not just the EU member states, it's a lot more countries. It would be interesting, I think. I think it's an interesting thinking. The question is, how would that work? I mean, there are of course already kind of relations with certain groups of countries, the ASEAN countries or so on. Also under development funds, there are some funding there that I am aware of. So I think it might have to come from other areas, such as external relations, development.
Well, whenever we talk about funding, we all know we don't touch the existing funds. We don't touch culture funds. We all agree on that. Never take out of there. That's for sure. Julia, you want to add something on that, maybe?
Yes, sure. I think it would have to be initiated by those countries, and in a lot of cases, this is already effective. Like Anita said, some of the Asian countries, we're in touch with the Korean embassy, the Japanese embassy. They already have funding projects for artists. So I'm not sure if we need to touch it from our end.
Okay.
I guess
that briefly.
Oh, sorry, I was going to briefly just add. I guess one thing I've seen anyway from a UK perspective is that a lot of festivals support artists and stuff like that to come over by, whether that be sponsorship, paying for like paper, like helping out with legal documents and helping supporting in resources in other ways. So not necessarily, may not be actual direct cash, but it could be basically through other means and resources. So I think I'd like to think that we've all got a goodwill approach and we understand the difficulties that we're all facing. So it's in our own collective interest, whether it just be directly UK, EU relations or further field, to really make sure that whenever we're dealing with, whether that be music artists, theatre makers, or anyone in the arts field, that we are supporting them with whatever resource and support that we actually have.
Right. I want to tackle one big question, a big elephant in the room that there was also that we talked about a little bit in the beginning, and I want to start it a little bit with Isabel Czepensky's question concerning the copyright directive, and I want to link it, and I tried to link it quite well. I hope you all saw the question from the panelists. The question is why. I mean, there's rumors that YouTube says that the UK should not use the copyright directive. Now, here's the thing: the UK government voted in favor of the copyright directive and made it possible in the form that it is at the moment. And then they left, and then they said, "Well, I mean, we voted in favor, but that doesn't mean that we actually apply it once we're out." So this is highly critical, I think, from all the sides. Which brings me, first of all, to the question, maybe anybody of you, especially from the UK, has some inside information if that's true, what to expect there, maybe a short yes or no. But the broader question that I want to raise here is the question, is there the tendency a little bit to eradicate the ties with Europe? especially from the Britain side, because we feel a little bit like it. And I can tell you, there are several programs where we see that. For example, we have Horizon and Erasmus, two programs that are highly linked, because you have research on the one hand, Horizon Europe, and then you have the students exchange on the other hand, the Erasmus program. They're highly linked, and now it's like cherry picking. We want to participate in the Horizon program, but we don't want to send our students to come to Europe and maybe touch upon Europeanism and internationalism on there. The same thing with cultural exchange. We don't want, I mean, it's not costing any more money. It's just costing what you get for it. So it's like, we don't want to see our artists actually be in exchange and have a cultural exchange with Europeans. This is the feeling that we have in a lot of cases. And if you would go through different issues, we would see it over and over again. And that is a question that I also want to raise, and that I try to leave for now. Basically, what do you feel, or what do you think, if we have the tendency from the British government side to really make a clear cut, not just from a political stand, we want to be sovereign and control our own borders, but also we don't want to have anything to do anymore with the EU, and we don't ever want to come back, and therefore we'll have a cultural change here in a very direct direction. There were several comments in the chat in the same direction, so if you have to comment anything on that, please feel free to do so. And first of all, if you have anything to comment on the question of copyright directive, please throw that in as well, so we can already answer this question as well.
I think I think it is sadly inevitable that the UK will take the kind of ex-girlfriend approach, if you like, to the EU. Certainly in the short term, I think you will have that situation where we're not going to articulate our approach in such a way that we're mimicking the things that they were doing. It is deeply disappointing for a lot of the music industry that things like the copyright directive, which we campaigned so hard to get into law, is not going to be implemented in the UK. That said, there is conversations with government ongoing at the moment in terms of what a future reform agenda for copyright, what that may look like, and whether those protections, in other words, what can be sort of taken forward. So I don't think all is not lost on some of those things, but I think certainly in the short term, the UK will want to articulate a different approach to ensure that there is some kind of the clear blue water across the English Channel does so, and unfortunately that is politics. But it's imperative for us who articulate and advocate for a lot of measures which actually the EU has been very forefront of and bringing forward, and which have benefited our industries and will potentially benefit our industries. It's imperative that we ensure that those are not lost in that kind of narrative that's operating at the moment.
Nick, maybe you want to go in there?
I mean, you know, I have a dream that a personal dream that we rejoin the European Union, but it's very hard to see how it could possibly happen. And so for the moment, I think that we need to pursue our relationships in a more bilateral way. But if the political tide starts to change in such a way as to suggest that, you know, a remarriage with the ex-girlfriend might be possible, I would be in support of that.
I think we all are. Maybe not to the idea of remarrying the ex-girlfriend, but to increase the cooperation. And one day, my personal hope is definitely that again, I said that in the beginning, that I have the possibility to work together with Magid again in the same committee and share files there.
I just had a quick question. I just wanted to ask one, maybe a bit of a controversial question, but I guess in your respective fields, what are the positives, if you believe there are any, or opportunities now available because of Brexit? And I'll go to you first, Tom.
positive that we've always focused on is which I think still is to be proven. So, but will this, by no longer having our trade policy so tightly defined by the EU, does that mean that we can make huge progress with other development markets for our music industry, and particularly other established markets such as the US, with kind of relations there? I said it really is to be confirmed as to whether that is possible, but it's the one positive, if you like, of Brexit, that it at least enables us to have conversations we weren't able to have previously. But the proof will be in the pudding as to whether that actually materializes.
Definitely, I think the devil's definitely in the detail. And Anita.
Trying to think of something positive of losing our friends of the UK.
Or opportunity, or it could be opportunity, not necessarily like positive.
Yeah, well, I think the opportunity is it sets you thinking, and it evokes a debate, and it makes that we don't take things for granted, and that we have to be vigilant, and that we take this as a moment to really discuss on and safeguard our democracies, and yeah, be very kind of active on that. And I think that has been, yeah, the signal that is given towards us in in the rest of Europe. That's yeah, something that nobody thought would happen or would be possible can happen. And I think that kind of awareness and arts and culture have the great opportunity to work on that. I mean, it's in their very essence, and to have that public debate and be in touch with politicians, but definitely also with the entire public. We have a great role there, and yeah, I think that's the opportunity to take.
Oh, thank you. Julie, I'm struggling to think in terms of if there are any in terms of your field, but maybe there's opportunities, or maybe there really isn't anything, but we'd like to just get your thoughts on that.
Stay in line with the remarrying the ex-girlfriend, maybe not remarrying the ex-girlfriend, but joint custody of the kids, which are the artists. So I think the only good I can see come out of the situation is that we need to get even better at networking. We might build stronger relationships, and focus on and more long-term relationships. If we actually invest in artists, they're going to stay with us longer than just running after the next offer, next promoter that offers more money. So building long-term relationships.
Brilliant, thank you. And also throw that question to you, Nick. Also, I know there's been much conversation in terms of like music per se, but I guess I don't know if you can shed light on like in the other kind of forms of art, whether that be theatre or contemporary art, whatever it is, kind of thing. Any thoughts would be great. But also, yeah, just what do you think in terms of Arts Council International England? What are the opportunities and stuff?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, across the art forms, as I mentioned a little earlier, people are thinking not so much, oh my God, it's all finished, what are we going to do? But okay, here's a set of problems. You know, how do we work our way around these? How do we maintain these relationships with Europe? How do we work out how to tour with all of the barriers, the new barriers that are in place? And rather than admitting defeat, they're simply setting about the business of working their way around it, you know. And that's the case across dance, music, literature, theatre, so on and so forth. And there are conversations about people who are so committed to working in Europe, you know, moving distribution centres into the EU so that they can operate within the structures of EU law and function more effectively. And that could be an interesting model. I think that as soon as creative organisations are forced to think differently and think anew, they come up with new ideas. We've seen that again and again and again. And the area in which I hope this is going to be most fruitful and it feels like there's a real moment now, is in environmental sustainability. You know, the change of regime in the States suggests that now the world really can work together. But how is cultural touring going to operate if we're going to do slow touring? How is cultural touring going to operate if it's going to be train only? I'm not suggesting that's an Arts Council policy, but it's a thought. How are we going to operate carbon neutral tours of European artists into England and vice versa? A whole set of new questions beyond just what are we going to do now that Britain's not in the European Union present themselves.
Do you know, of course, there's nothing that can replace live performance. I'm sure we can all agree. But I guess with Brexit merged with the pandemic, have you, any of you guys seen any emerging and alternatives of people just thinking creatively in terms of still trying to overcome the issue of borders, but still being effective in some way?
I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Yeah, no, it's just an open question. If anyone had any comments on that. Julia, we're going to say something? No, that's perfect. Okay, not to
the streaming. I mean, every artist is now working on some kind of streaming. I don't really see how this is going to replace the live music, but there are situations. We have a band from South Africa that's playing arena stadiums in South Africa and on a club level in Germany. So this will be a unique experience for the German fans to actually see them play a stadium. So that's, but it's not going to replace touring.
Of course. So we had a poll that asked the question, how would you describe the future of EU-UK cultural relations? And the answer, the most common answer, favorite answer was, yo, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. So I think, in honest, I think there's just a lot of, I think a lot of people can get a lot of uncertainty more than anything else, and a lot of things still to be hashed out. But I'll hand it over to Niklas then, and I'll come and I'll end up closing it. Nick?
Yeah. I think the audience keeping it classic with the 90s there. So just I wanted to go through 2 or 3 questions that were raised. They were very technical. First of all, concerning why Horizon Europe and not Creative Europe is joined. Answered that a little bit. The Horizon Europe is a very important program for both sides, actually, because this research combination is very important for the UK as well as for Europe, and so there was a very high focus from both sides to keep them in there. Where Creative Europe, and there is really the question why not, and I think there is also one of the answers is to cut all the cultural ties with EU. Obviously, well, the official answer was it's too expensive. Then concerning the question whether we should ask all the people of Europe and from the UK if they support that artists should move freely, I don't think that is quite necessary. I think what I was surprised to hear a little bit was what Tom mentioned, that there is this spirit of cooperation, especially in the visa question. I mean, the propositions there were are fairly doable. I mean, it means 3-month visa-free time where you also can pack all your stuff with you, and that is definitely doable for certain groups of workers, for example, artists. And so the possibility is there that the political will have to be extracted from everything, and we can work on that in the future. I think lobbying for membership of Creative Europe, basically, I think the answer to that is we all have to do that, right? It's not just politicians that we can rely on doing that, because we all know that the culture sector is always a little bit in the backside of the parliament, in the backbench of the parliament, never well thought of from a lot of politicians, where we all know the value of creativity and culture, and so therefore we all have to rally around that. Also concerning the the question of if cities, local authorities can do anything. Yes, of course, please invite artists from all countries into your city and have festivals, and everything that you can do should be done. So we really need to work on this together, I believe. And I also have to mention, I really like this community today. Was very helpful. We want to bring together different people from different places, from different networks, to really form a new network and to get to know. I saw that a lot of emails have been exchanged in the chat. Use this function definitely. I want to end it with 2 points from my side. First of all, we figured out that artists are like fish. They don't know borders. I think that's a good comparison here. We all know now that we don't know what to do with the ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend here, that we need some time apart, maybe share the custody of the kids, but that we want to have a good future, not so much of one of going to the courtroom and battling and crying, but really of working together and taking care of what we have here. And I think that's a good prospect. And with these words, I want to give it to Magid, because he is not just a wonderful politician, zoologist, and an activist. He's also an author, and I think the title of his newest book is very compulsory for this finishing, which is The Art of Disruption, a manifesto for real change. So Magid, please finish it up with disruption.
I'll just report back a poll, which the question was, overall, are you optimistic about the post-Brexit EU-UK cultural relations? And I hate to say it, but the most common answer was no, not so much. So, but I think in honesty, and I want to back up everything that Niklas has said, and in terms of what we learned so far. And the reality of it is that we've got no choice. Like, it's in all our equal interests. Yes, it is a bit of a shit situation, but we have to kind of make do with what we've got and kind of not really lose sight of what really matters and the role and the impact arts and culture actually plays. Because I like to think each and every single one of us are doing what we're doing, not just because it's a job. Of course, it's a job, it pays the bills, but also we really believe in the role that arts and culture plays in society, in our community, and especially when we're talking about our direct neighbors and with each other. So, and thank you very much to all our wonderful guests, panelists, Anita, Tom, Julia, Nick, for taking the time out on this Tuesday evening. Also, honestly, all the amazing people who've been really contributing and a lot, and by the chat and the Q&A section. Of course, I also want to give a massive shout out to Benjamin, who's the tech person behind making this happen, and to everyone in Niklas's team who put this together as well. So thank you, everyone. Hope you found it as fruitful and enjoyable as we did, and we look forward to crossing paths in the future where we can continue the fight to protect and empower arts and culture between the UK and the EU. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Magid and Niklas. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Take care.
Goodbye, everyone.